To people who have also worked with multimillionaires or billionaires, what is something different they do from ordinary people? One old money rich person treated me to a fancy meal, and she was super polite and nice and tipped well. What struck me was the decisiveness and confidence that everyone there would cater to her, and they did. She wanted X dish that they didn't make that day, and they made it. The one that sticks with me was at the end when she said, "I want a cappuccino with something. I want them to put a design on it. I've gotten cute cappuccinos in my life. It doesn't even cost extra. It never occurred to me to just ask for everything I want all the time." This was the same person who, on a business trip, hugged me after the flight. "I did it," woman thorned. Me, "Oh, was this your first time in the economy?" She goes, "No, flying commercial, just so we all understand how rich." A friend of mine at school was old money, British aristocracy. They never deliberately showed their wealth. For the most part, they were completely humble. For example, they only had one car, and it was a tiny 30-year-old beater. They lived in an old farmhouse. It was nice, big, but not showy. It was only when you got to know them you realized the vastness of their fortune. There were little things that wouldn't immediately strike you, but when you realized, then you knew. They enjoyed things that most people wouldn't even dream of: an entire wheel of Parmesan cheese on top of the fridge. Their cellar had 1,000 bottles of wine in it from their own vineyard in Italy. Every single piece of clothing they wore was personally tailored in Savile Row. The gold box in the living room? A solid gold cigar case, a personal gift from the Shah of Persia. If you asked, you'd discover that the land their farmhouse was on was about 1,000 acres, with tenant farmers on it. They had a pied-à-terre in London, a castle in Tuscany, an apartment in Paris, a townhouse in Oxford, and It's Only a Little Place on the Peak in Hong Kong. And probably more places I didn't even know about. But never ever did they brag. The only reason I found out about all this was because I got to know their son and then the parents. Nobody else who knew him at school, a government school, had a clue, other than he had a posh accent. Have no fear when addressing anyone, no social barriers. OMG, so true. I have known my BFF since high school. She is an entrepreneur and inventor and has made millions of her inventions. We were at an event for the giant corporation I work for, which was held for those of us receiving milestone service awards. The president of the entire corporation was there, turning away just as we arrived to get a picture with him. My BFF, without hesitation, grabbed his arm and said, "But you haven't met my BFF, hey Lottie? She's right here." I could not believe her audacity, lol. But we got our picture, and the big guy was totally polite. Now I understand how she snags investors and gets her projects funded. ETA, Buff and I work in completely different industries and live thousands of miles away from each other. No one at the event knew who she was, other than the fact that she was my friend. ETA 2, I am not comfortable outing her, so I won't say what she has invented. But I will say it is transportation related and tangible, so not software or anything else ET related. And that's all the info I am willing to give out about what she has accomplished. He managed time very differently than anyone I was used to. E.g., our meeting with him began precisely on schedule, lasted 30 minutes, and there was no chit-chat. Before this meeting, we had a pre-meeting with his admin to discuss expectations. The admin explained that we had to be on time, have no introductions, titles, just names, no small talk, no marketing, and be prepared to answer technical and financial questions quickly and succinctly. For this latter, if there were numbers, we had to know precisely which page of the material had the information. When the meeting took place, we were brought in exactly, to the second, at the start time. Sat down, and within 30 seconds he was asking us all manner of questions. I had to field technical questions that appeared to be asked not so much for whether my answer was right, but that I didn't hesitate. I also gained a healthy respect for my manager, as he was sharp and answered quickly and accurately. I work with lots of millionaires and a few billionaires. Most work non-stop. There's no boundary between workday, holiday, weekend, etc. But there is also no boundary between friends, family, and coworkers lots of times. It is easy to forget the cost of things when money is meaningless. When a 500K Ferrari is the financial equivalent of a gallon of milk for most families, then spending 20K on a party that includes private chefs, a bar staff, etc. is nothing. What happened recently was that someone mentioned there were a bunch of kids in MS who were getting trained at trade schools for jobs. But the certification exam was $350, so only 2 kids out of the 35 in our pilot program got certified. It was hard for anyone in that room to understand how these families couldn't come up with $350 after having a whole year to prepare. Most people in that room bill at $250-500 HR, if they work at all. 2 days ago, someone took me out to lunch, and the bill was $250. But since it's Christmas season and the waitress was really great, he tipped $250. A different time, we went out for drinks at the bartender was one of those, tell me what you like and I'll make you something. The lady goes to pay and just writes math in the tip line and puts $500 on the total for what was less than 3 drinks a person for 4 of us. On the other hand, there are lots of times when someone says something completely off the wall, elitist. I grew up incredibly poor, and some of these people are 5th and 10th generation wealth. They grew up with maids and butlers and private planes, and their great-grandparents have buildings all over the US named after them. One time, one of them was talking about how she went to Walmart to people watch and never felt unsafe even though it was the black part of town. She tried to make some black friends because if she could befriend them, then she could educate them on better financial decisions. It was such a condescending and racist approach. We had to counsel her to never do that again. Another guy says things like, the blacks will, and he thinks he's very woke. Aside from all that, there is a general loss of touch with what everyday people face. My aunt and uncle are self-made multimillionaires. If you met them, you'd think they were well off, but nothing spectacular. In general, they're both very frugal. However, the 2 areas where they completely detach from ordinary life are 1. Vet bills for their animals. The example that most stands out in my mind is their last dog. He needed dialysis and no vet where we live could provide it. So they did their research and discovered that the best treatment in the country was available in London. A flat in Kew, I think somewhere fairly central anyway, was rented for the 6 months the dog would need treatment, and my uncle would stay in it for 1 week a month while the dog had his treatment, then travel back home for the other 3 weeks. 2. Legal help. Are neighbors being a pain in the backside? Send in the solicitor. Trying to organize a purchase or sale, and it's taking too long? Pay the solicitor to fast track. Local counsel leaving traffic lights up for over a week after work has been completed? Cry havoc and let slip the solicitors of war. I do consulting for public companies and work directly with CEOs and board members, so they're all multi-millionaires, but only a couple in the 3 comma club. 1. There is no demarcation between personal and professional time. We should set up a call, meaning vaguely next week, and they will respond with, I am free at 10 a.m. on Sunday while I'm at my kid's ski lesson. 2. They ask a million questions about every detail. This is the #1 personality trait I've noticed. Critical thinking is to the point where if you misspeak one word that is easily well understood, they will question you to be certain. I do think this is one of many factors that has made them successful. I was born to working-class parents who made it to the upper middle class and put me in old New England prep schools, so I grew up around a lot of super rich people despite not being one myself. There were exceptions, but generally, the old money families were pretty humble and unassuming. One of my closest friends, for example, grew up in a legit mansion, 15K plus square feet in the primary residence, had several other houses in various states, countries, a yacht, and just endless money, and yet he still grew up wearing hand-me-downs from his older brothers and family friends. These families had the mindset that we have endless pits of money, so we'll buy whatever we want. Alongside, it's silly to spend money for the sake of spending money because we don't need to prove ourselves to anyone. As a result, you'd end up with these weird inconsistencies. Like this kid is at my house talking about how his mom just bought a second set of horse stables, so she has a place for her horses at their favorite vacation house, while my mom, who grew up in the projects, is wondering why his jacket has a tier with duct tape covering it. They spend money for pleasure, utility, and convenience, not for status or superficial reasons. In comparison, first or second generation money families tended to be concerned with keeping up appearances and buying fashionable things. Again, there were exceptions, but this was definitely the trend. Edit. If anyone's interested, I did pretty well for myself, but made the decision to buy a home in a town with top-level public schools rather than sending my kids to private school. My property tax is wicked high, but it's less than half of what tuition for one kid currently is at the schools I went to, 60K plus for high school. Well, the owner of my small company is incredibly wealthy, but also rad as fuck, and he drives a tank on the property all the time, just for the fuck of it. He also owns a very old, gorgeous estate from an extremely influential family, think Vanderbilts, and we throw parties there. But on top of it, he lets his employees rent it out for events. So my husband and I are throwing an anniversary party, never had a reception, in 2024. We have the entire estate and all 10 bedrooms for a whole weekend, and it isn't costing us a single dime. If I didn't work for the company, the cost of the venue would be upwards of $25K for the day. I never expected someone so incredibly wealthy to be so down to earth and generous. It's exactly who I would strive to be at that level of wealth.